Welcome to We Do, the officially unofficial podcast for Watchmen on HBO. I'm Jim.
I'm A.Ron.
And today we're talking about Season 1, Episode 4, titled If You Don't Like My Story, Write Your Own. It's Damon Lindelof's message to everyone watching Watchmen right now. Also has other meanings. Do you know what the other meaning for this thing is?
Yeah, I guess this is a quote from that Things Fall Apart novel, which is, we're going to talk about that in the feedback section.
Okay.
But broadly speaking, it's a novel about the African experience of the white colonials first appearing and their traditional beliefs being replaced by Christian beliefs, and that's like that's something the hero of the story is, I guess, a quote from them. And then it's also kind of ironic because, you know, there's a whole bunch of trials and travails that this person goes through, and they end up, as they spoil in this episode, he ends up hanging himself. And then there's a bit at the end where someone's recounting this to like a regional administrator that's working for like the British colonials, and he's like, "Oh, that story be a good page in my book, or maybe a paragraph or two." Like, you know, taking this entire huge breadth of experience and just condensing it down to just a part of, you know, this glorious colonial history. So obviously the metaphor, it works in so many ways, because yes, it is like Damon Lindelof's middle finger to anybody, Monday morning quarterback in his Sunday night drama. And also, like so many things in this fucking show, it goes a mile deep too.
Yeah.
In how it relates to the source material.
Okay.
So there.
You've had at least one more watch, I hope.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think on second viewing?
I mean, I really like the show, and I really like this episode, and I thought that after I read people's feedback and I was looking at people theorizing, and I had some conversations with friends of mine, and you know, gave this another careful watch, that I think things are hanging together and are not. I mean, it's definitely fucking weird, but it's not maybe as weird and mysterious as it looks in first glance. Which gives me hope that like this is all going somewhere. Because like when my first reaction on Sunday night is like, Jesus Christ, what am I going to say about this? I'm scared. I'm scared that this show is jerking me around. Yeah. I don't think that was just me being a reactionary. I think there is a plan here.
Okay.
Really? Okay.
I don't know if that's the word I would label it as I would use to label it. I think that is a perfectly valid response as a casual watcher of this show. And I'm going to say, I think it's turning off a lot of casual watchers of this show.
Yeah.
Because you watch these episodes one time, and you don't go to Reddit, and you don't, sit there and think about this episode and dig into the backstory of these events and like know anything about Watchmen in the first place. This thing looks to me like it's spinning out of control. Yeah. If I'm a casual viewer, and the ratings are kind of showing that. I mean, it's dropped half its audience, as far as I understand, since episode 1. It had a little bit of a bump this week, which is interesting. It's a hard show to just casually watch because it's so fucking weird.
It's getting squeezed from both ends, because you know, the initial reaction of like, it's, you know, the bro contingent that's huge Watchmen, like Zack Snyder fans or even comic fans, are like, you know, telling their friends that, oh, it's just a bunch of social justice warrior bullshit, and then on the other end of it,
with Watchmen, right?
you've got like people saying it's impenetrable, it's weird, it's weird but I don't know, because like it's also kind of in like the Twin Peaks zone, where it's very weird but watchable and fascinating. Like it's not weird like off-putting, even though I said that Sunday night. I think that's mostly off-putting because I feel like a responsibility to talk about it. But it's weird and watchable and very well made and acted, and I feel like if it wasn't being squeezed from both of those ends, maybe it would find an audience of people that like that, because, you know, with the return of Twin Peaks, it still showed that there is a certain amount of fascination with the weird, and with success of Lost, success of Leftovers. Although, you know, like we talk about the success of Leftovers, but I think its max audience peaked at like 1 million. So like this is kind of a piece. I mean, maybe HBO execs were hoping for Leftovers with a little bit of bump because you've got this well-known license attached to it, kind of. But
and they got that for the first episode. Like all of the marketing around it, all of it. Like it was the highest the biggest premiere for HBO, in the history of HBO. So like, it worked. It just the show itself is divisive for a lot of people. It's confrontational in a way that I think is cool, but a lot of people won't like. And it's very weird.
It is definitely weirder than the first Watchmen, right? Because a lot of the weirdness,
absolutely,
if you like the thing about the Watchmen, if you just divorce it from like what we know about superheroes, like Dr. Manhattan's fucking weird, but he's weird in a way that we're culturally prepared to accept because we see godlike, superheroes. They don't usually lean into that, but it's like just a slight little twist of that. Whereas, fishing fetuses out of crab traps in a pond is
and incubating them into adults
and then
firing them into the atmosphere,
firing them to the upper atmosphere and doing it as some kind of catapult study. That's just really fucking weird.
It is, yeah.
And negotiating by way of baby legacy is weird.
Absolutely,
right.
Yeah. And the other layer of this is the puzzle box aspect. Like Watchmen had a central puzzle. A central mystery, right? It was at its heart like a noir detective kind of story. This is much, much different. This is like when Lindelof said, look, I want to put my own stamp on this. It has to be original. I think this is partially what he meant. Like it isn't just a central mystery around the death of the comedian. It's something much more mysterious.
Yeah. And then there's like a lot of things where like I don't think I saw any compelling. Well, I mean, I guess I saw some compelling, like for Lube Band, for example. The only thing people were capable of saying that was interesting is that like he might be PD. But that is the least interesting thing about. The who is the least interesting thing about Lube Man. Like what
the why is
how not only just in like
how's pretty interesting.
Not only just the narrative, but also like the meta narrative. Like what purpose is it solve? Like like that 1 minute chase scene. Like what does it do to drive the plot forward? It's something, right?
Yeah.
Because like I saw,
even if it's just eyes on Angela doing this wheelchair dump, it could tie into the plot. But I mean, is that ultimately worth the time spent on it?
Well, I saw there's people because like I saw on Reddit people saying a couple things like, well, Lindelof with The Leftovers and Lost, like there's all these like wild goose chases and dead end trails, and I'm like, maybe you could say that about Lost, but I thought The Leftovers was pretty fucking tight.
It is, and it's way less weird than this show. Way less weird. Lost gets there. Lost gets really fucking weird at some point with time travel and all crazy shit.
Yeah.
But like Leftovers is pretty grounded.
I guess it did. Like,
but the vast majority of its runtime.
You're only saying that in the hindsight of seeing all the finales, where it's like it's where you get to pull the mask off of the guy, and Scooby Doo tells you it's all got a plausible explanation. Like there's points in those seasons where shit was really weird.
And they never did that in Leftovers. They never pulled the mask back and said, this is the thing.
You don't think so?
No.
Well, okay.
They intentionally set out to not do that.
But I'm saying like they there's a lot of things that looked a lot more spooky and mysterious and like divine than they actually turned out being.
Yeah.
Or maybe that's not true. Maybe that's just like my
that's probably true. But I mean, sometimes the weird pays off. Like my absolute favorite thing of this entire show so far is Lube Man. Like it's such a what the fuck. Like Angela's response is perfect, and I just crack up when I watch that scene because it makes no sense. It's out of nowhere, and it's just hysterical.
Yeah, and the fact that the show is kind of like doing it along with us. Like the protagonist of the show is like just as like weirded out and like what the fuck as we are. I think makes it relatable too. So
yeah. So I don't know. I really enjoy this episode. I think it's extremely weird, and I don't blame you if you can't follow it. We're gonna try and clear some stuff up.
I mean, like, I think a reasonable viewer at the end of this episode could be like, you know what? I'm going to do other things with my Thanksgiving and Christmas season, and if I hear that this show actually ties up everything and makes sense, I'll give it another try.
Yeah.
Because it is, like, unless you're willing to play the Reddit and the forum and the social media and the Hollywood Reporter game, it's challenging. It's challenging watching at times.
For a lot of reasons, yeah. Okay, let's start off with the recap here. We have a cold open, which is a day in the life of Clark Acres Farms, which turns into a strange one when Lady True shows up and offers them a deal. She says, "Got $5 million plus one child, which you desperately want. for their entire 40-acre farm, and they have 3 minutes to decide. So they sign the contract, and immediately after they do, something falls from the sky onto their land, and Lady True says, "That is mine."
This is another, like, there's a lot of things going on here, but it's also another kind of play on Superman.
Yep.
Because you got Clark Acres, which is not, the Kent farm. It's Clark, the first name of Superman, Clark Kent. And you have a couple.
And is it Martha's maiden name? Is that right?
Is Clark?
I think that's where Clark Kent comes from, yeah.
So like if Superman is adopted and she was a single mom, he could have been Clark?
Yes.
I don't know that. I'm not that big on Superman.
No, I don't know. I read that somewhere.
But it's almost like a what if. Like, what if right before Superman crashed on their farm, Kal-El, rather, some wealthy Vietnamese woman, trillionaire, had come and said, like, I got a perfectly genetic, because it's the same thing. Like, the Kent's famously childless, couldn't conceive. This is a miracle baby.
One drops out of the sky.
What if she's like, hey, take this baby instead, and then they miss out on getting Superman? What is the thing that crashed to the ground?
It's a good question. There are a lot of theories.
Also, I don't feel like this is a flashback anymore.
Why?
Because, well, the big thing is, I think, because I paid a lot of attention to the dissolves and transitions, and if you want to say some of these transitions mean things, then all the transitions mean things, and clearly a lot of these transitioning from Cal's waffle iron to a fucking gate lock opening doesn't mean a goddamn thing. So if you say that all these transitions, like telescope to the moon, field to parking lot, mean something, then you have to explain the waffle iron and gate latch.
I guess I don't like that from a filmmaking perspective. When your transitions don't mean anything.
Right.
Transitions are supposed to mean something. The duration of a transition means something. The style of the transition means something. Like, all that should mean something.
Yeah.
If it's all
like
just
a fade
there
is different from a white. Fade to black is different than fade to white. Like,
yeah.
I agree.
A slow transition means longer passage of time. Stuff like that.
Yeah, but when you have a puzzle box show where like part of it is kind of decoding what the fuck is going on anyway, and the filmmaker is like using transitions to, like you have to figure out what they mean in the context of this work. And it's perfectly fine to break rules if you know why the rules are there and what you're doing to the audience when you're breaking them. And if the audience at the and here's crucially, this is how you tell if it works or not. Does the audience feel like they got the rug pulled out from underneath them and they're unhappy about it, or does the audience think like, oh wow, in retrospect this is all very clever and wise? And I think
they're doing both here, which is very confusing. And I think it's one of those things that makes me feel off-put.
But there's clues. So the other thing is, like, Lady True's daughter, Bien, is exactly the same. Like,
sure, but
she's
I don't know that means. I don't know that means as much as you think it means.
Because she could be a clone.
There could be time travel involved. Like, there's a lot of theories going around right now.
There's time travel? I've not seen a credible time travel theory.
There are time travel theories with this Millennium Clock and Ozymandias. Yeah, I mean, there's a whole bunch of ways you could explain the daughter being the same age. Yeah, the transition is a little bit weird there. But okay, yeah, let's say it's not a flashback. What purpose does the transition serve? Doesn't matter.
If you believe that, for example, Adrian Veidt, Ozymandias, is being held off-world, and he has been trying to escape this prison, this could very well be his flaming escape pod crashing to Earth.
Okay.
So
I mean, yeah, it's a
flashback, and we're assuming that, like, he's still 4 years into a 7-year exile or whatever it was, 6 or 7 year exile. Then that would change my mind, because it means Ozymandias has been back for some amount of time. We just haven't known about it.
Here's why I say time travel is a possibility, because she clearly knows. Lady True knows that this is going to happen. I don't think she shows up on this farm, buys it with a baby and $5 million bucks.
Sure.
And just goes, oh, what a stroke of luck. Here comes this thing falling out of the sky. She knows what's going to hit the ground.
I agree, but if she's running the prison, she probably knows that Veidt has escaped, or maybe she's released him, and there's ways to explain that rather than her having precognition.
Yeah, sure. But it could also be explained by precognition.
Certainly.
There's also a scene. So this girl who delivers the baby, the daughter of Lady True, is the same girl who picks up the papers in, I think it's episode 2, the newspapers from the newsstand.
Yep.
I find that interesting, and this is another reason why I'm thinking, maybe time travel? Because someone who wants to stay that up to date on current events it shows some kind of obsession. And I wonder if the scenes that we're seeing are more of a flashback where they have gone, flash forward. Yeah, where they've gone forward in time and picked up newspapers and know that this thing is going to land where it lands.
Tanner, the
essentially,
Back to the Future, betting on the World
future
Series
knowledge,
thing?
and so he uses the newspapers to get that.
All right.
I don't know, but it's possible.
There's also a little Easter egg here that the lady, Mrs. Clark, is reading this book called Fog Dancing, which in the Watchmen universe is written by an author by the name of Max Shea, which was one of the guy who did the kind of like the backstory for the Squid invasion. One of the many people that Adrian Veidt hired and then murdered to cover up the conspiracy to do this. And I think that the point this serves, other than to be an Easter egg, is also to tightly tie in this Lady True plot with what Ozymandias was doing. Like whatever she's doing with this Millennium Clock, which, by the way, she took pains, even though elsewhere in the episodes they call it just a clock. She says it's much more than a big clock. Yeah. In this 3 minutes she spends with the Clark. So
but it does tell time.
It does tell time because like much more means yes, it is a clock, but it also is much more than that. And I think that there's whatever this thing is, it's going to be central to the plot in the same way that Adrian's psychic squids Psychic Squid was instrumental and pivotal to the original Watchmen.
Yeah. It's also, I think, important to note how angry she is. She seems to be about these non-viable eggs, where she says, bullshit.
Yeah.
Which will kind of come in later, I think, with a lot of speculation. And theorizing.
Oh, really? I'm interested in...
Yeah, I mean, eggs are all over this fucking show, and particularly this episode.
Yeah. This lady tripping and ruining all the eggs, and the guy saves the one. Yeah, there's definitely. And,
I mean, the intro of the episode is the Watchmen logo breaking out of an egg, right?
Yeah,
and it's yolk,
sure as shit is.
Okay, then we transition back to town where Angela removes every trace of Will from her, what I'm calling the fakery. The Greenwood Center for Cultural Heritage calls to tell her they found a new branch of her family tree. So she goes there, she breaks in and does a little genealogical research. And then Angela's car drops out of the sky. She runs outside to find Laurie laughing about it. And they call it in. And she grabs Will's pills out of the glove box. Important.
There's a couple things here.
A lot of stuff
I thought was interesting. The fact that like Angela burnt her grandfather's note.
I got the impression that was an accident. Like she was gonna go.
Totally.
Yeah, she was gonna go to burn it, but then she had second thoughts, and then she accidentally burned it.
This idea of being careless with one's legacy is, I think, what they're trying to get across there.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting how they said that like the camera lingered on this ancestry being paid by generous donations from the Legend Fund.
Yes.
Like. Did you find any connections? Like, I wondered.
I don't think we know what the Legend Fund is yet.
That's one thing that I had as a note to research, and I literally like, I spent as much time until we got to record this, and that was one I didn't get around to. Like, I wonder if that has shown up in other episodes.
Yeah.
The other thing is like, have people been speculating that Will was a direct ancestor to Bass Reeves, the famed black lawman from the Oklahoma territories? Because this scene blows that up, I think, by showing that like this guy's her grandfather goes by Will Reeves, but his parents' last names were Williams and Roberson. So like, it seems that this is an alias that he took from his childhood hero.
Yeah.
So the Will Reeves identity is apparently entirely fictitious.
Yep.
And I also thought there's something weird about the way this computer is putting together data, and that it says that your great grandparents and their only son was killed in this riot.
Mm-hmm.
But you do have a grandfather who has a mysterious past. We don't even know his last name. We don't have a picture. Is it not weird that
there shouldn't be a link there?
Well, or if there is a link, then why don't they just express, like, why isn't it just explicit? Like, if they're doing DNA matching and all that stuff, like, I'm curious. There's some kind of omission here that's important, or it's just a script fart. But I couldn't quite figure out what. Because it seems like you're right.
If
like
your entire family dies in race riots, you don't have a great grandfather because you don't exist.
Yes.
Like that's
what I'm saying.
The whole thing. Yeah, it's
like this computer, like those grandparents link should be missing, or it should just say, oh, this guy's. I guess the other option could be that, like, this is a bastard child of her father or mother. You know, that's like it's not the Williams-Robeson reunion. It's some kind of outside the lines kind of. But I don't know.
Yeah.
I feel like it's important that the thing made this inference, but it didn't also make the inference. But I'm not sure what it means.
Yeah. And then she very much does not want anything to do with this legacy, right? She's actively against it because I think of just the wrinkle in her life.
Yeah.
That she doesn't want at the moment. Like, she's got enough fucking shit to deal with right now. This legacy being tossed on top of her.
I really liked how they overlaid, like, Will's holographic face with hers, and then as she rejects him, like, her face, like, the camera pushes past the hologram and it's just her face, like, stands alone. You know, pretty nifty visual storytelling there.
This is a practically a fucking museum, this place. Like, with serious works of art. Like, this tree thing where it spits out an acorn and you put it in this receptacle that then reads the acorn somehow and projects this family tree image that grows and it's animated. Like, this is a really fucking involved thing for what could be expressed just as easily on a piece of graph paper with a chart.
Right, and you could take it home with you.
Right, yeah. Not every house has an acorn.
Well, in the Watchmen universe, that Jaws 4D technology that Marty McFly was all about, they really ran with that. In our timeline, it kind of peters out with 3D goggles, but they really took the 4D Jaws stuff to its logical conclusion of an ancestry.
It was the only non-Manhattan powered piece of technology they had.
Yeah.
So they had to run with it.
That's true. Yeah.
Everything else was banned. They just went overboard on that.
These you think these cars run on electricity? Nope. Holographic trees. They took a whole bunch of holographic trees. They compressed them under a holographic sea for millions of holographic years, and they came up with holographic oil. That's
what
a
do
fact.
Holographs eat? We might be talking about that at some point.
There's a Rick and Morty crossover.
Okay, let's move on to Angela getting home. Her bed is completely full, so she goes to sleep with her son, where she lies to him about where she was, and they talk about how scared they are of the terrorist attack that happened, where Judd blew up. And
apparently Topher was there. His little sisters weren't.
Yeah, I don't recall seeing him, but
I don't either, but apparently he was. The kid says and I don't know why he'd lie. His mom was there for sure, and she would know.
Yeah. And then he gives her his stuffed cat to comfort her.
So it's supposed to be a stuffed version of Ozymandias's genetically engineered lynx tiger.
Yeah. Bubastis.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, which was kind of cool to see. Anything you want to talk about here, or keep going? Okay, the next morning, Angela tells Cal what she got up to last night, and the kids are arguing over whether Judd is in heaven now, and Cal steps in to tell them heaven isn't real, and Judd is nowhere, just like he was before he was born. I don't think, this may be a controversial opinion, I don't think this is a controversial thing to tell children.
It's the way I've rolled. I mean, it's the truth.
Yeah.
From my point of view, anyway.
I think if you think that this is a incredibly depressing thing to tell a child and a piece of information that should be hidden from your children, you're probably coming from a perspective where you were not given the truth about death when you were a child. I mean, and I can understand why you might think that, but
well, everybody's entitled to their own beliefs on the afterlife. I just think that this is like a lot of people, when they decide not to believe in whatever afterlife, they don't think about like the way that Cal broke this down about like, death isn't scary, just like before you were born isn't scary.
Exactly.
Is a great way to do it. Now,
I think he does a great job explaining it.
In this universe, though, you can't help but notice that like there is an exception to this, which is Dr. Manhattan. I mean, Dr. Manhattan was nowhere for like 3 months, and then he came back fully reconstituted. Not even fully reconstituted better than ever. So is there a there? I mean, I'm not saying Uncle Judd is Manhattan. I'm just saying that, like, in Cal's universe...
You wouldn't be the only one if you were to say that.
In Cal's universe, especially when you know that the Russians are working on intrinsic field technology, perhaps making their own Dr. Manhattan, like, there are exceptions to, like, death being the end. And they never really explain, like, how John Osterman did that feat. Like, if something vaporizes you and kills you completely, where
does your consciousness reside?
Yeah, there has to be a structure. There has to be some kind of like, unless you want to go talking about the soul, then you've got to clear out. But if you want to stay, material, you want to stay secular, then you have to explain by what mechanism did his consciousness prevail.
Yeah, and I always took it as just like, don't think about it.
Yeah,
it's
superhero shit.
This is crazy like.
But I think that they're like, this is Lindelof's way of saying we should be thinking about that, because like if it's like Dr. Manhattan is the Jesus Christ in this example. He's the human that came back, and it seems like an interesting point to make in this particular universe. That's all I want to say. And also. What better way to assuage children's grief over the empty nothingness that is human life, but with waffles?
Sure. That'd work for me.
Yeah.
It's been working for 37 years.
No one gave me waffles when I realized there was nothing after death, so waffles. You got to follow that up with waffles.
A lot of people are using this cold explanation of death, portrayal of death, to try and theorize that Cal is Dr. Manhattan. I'm not buying it.
Yeah, because this is like my cultural baggage, I guess. I don't see that as cold or heartless. Like it seemed like he was being a dad,
Seemed like it. All right. Angel visits Looking Glass in his prepper bunker. She asks him, he's been taking pictures of these squids. As soon as the sirens go off, he goes up there and he snaps some photos.
But Wade, every single time he hears that siren, runs to his bunker because he's afraid it's going to be the big one.
Yeah.
That's living your life in a lot of fear, Wade.
Sure is. So she asks him to get his ex to tell her what Will's pills are. LG is reluctant to dig on Judd's murder until Angela shows him this KKK uniform she found in his closet and asks him to hold on to it for her.
It's interesting when she asked him, did you know Judd was a racist? He's like, well, he's a white man in Oklahoma. Wade himself being a white man in Oklahoma. But I don't know. I think he's I don't know that that's like, because a lot of people were saying that that's like kind of a hint or smoking gun, but I think it's like just being aware of the situation. Like I would never deny that I am racist. Like I work at it. I try not to be, but like in the sense that like you have biases, unconscious biases, that I benefit from a society that was built on racism. But it's like then when you pull there's the difference between like racist and baseline racism that you absorb in the environment and also pull out of your backpack. Well, here's a Klan robe. Are you this racist?
Yeah.
I thought that was kind of that was interesting.
Yeah, I find it interesting, his obsession with the squids too, and especially his line about it's 30 seconds of life and they spend all of it dying. Because I kind of feel like that's what Looking Glass is doing. Like when you're prepping for the big one constantly and you're living your life in that much fear, it sort of prevents you from actually living a life. Right?
Yeah, like what life are you trying to?
You're
preserve?
living for your own death, and like, man, Rick and Morty is all up in the Watchmen this week because there's some stuff about that in Rick and Morty this week
that blew up Lindelof spot.
Yeah, I just, he doesn't see the hypocrisy in that, or maybe he does. He's self-aware enough to see it, right? He's got to be.
Wade, are you talking about?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Self-aware enough for what? I got lost in
the irony of describing these squids as spending their entire lives dying.
Yeah.
When he himself is essentially doing the same by prepping constantly.
Like, what's the difference between spending all your life not dying versus spending your life dying?
spending your life obsessing over death.
It's like, you're spending your life not utilizing your free will properly.
Right, and I think
live.
These two scenes, the one before this where Cal explains that you were nothing and you will become nothing, ties in with this where he essentially bemoans the fact that these beings with such short lives, which I would kind of describe humans as, spend all of it worrying about their own death or dying. I think those two things go hand in hand.
I buy it.
I like LG saying that maybe this thing is just a keepsake.
I mean, it's
because we have speculated that.
Sure, yeah.
Maybe this is just a legacy, and in some weird, fucked up justification in his own head, Judd was able to divorce like his own belief system with this built-in legacy.
Have you seen like there's like every once in a while this makes the social media rounds that there's this black man who like intentionally tries to befriend white supremacists, and he has in his closet a collection of like robes that like once they get out of the Klan and express regret from it, they like give him their robes and their like trophies. He's got like 60 of them hanging in his closet. When I was seeing this and he said it's like, well, maybe it's just like a keepsake, I'm thinking like 3 generations from now, like someone like one of his great grandchildren are going to die, and no one's going to remember this guy and his mission, and they're just going to go up to this like black family's home, and there's going to be like 60 Klan robes in some old moldy closet, and people are going to go, what the fuck? So it's like it's not, but I mean the thing is like the whole like you have a secret compartment, it's all like lovingly that's what makes it weird.
To that person, write a fucking note. Write a note today. Leave it in your closet.
Right, yeah. Write a journal of like yeah, for sure.
Drop it off at your local right-wing newspaper and let them publish it 30 years after your death.
Yeah, and it's also a big difference like having like a black man having 60 Klan robes in his closet versus a white guy having one.
There is a difference.
There's a lot of different there's a lot more like room for what the fuck in that set than there is
a lot
on the
harder
ladder. Exactly. It's like it's either the Dave Chappelle skit or
is he trying to research squids himself? Like, does he think he has look at the big brain on Looking Glass? He can outdo all the scientists globally. And somehow come up with the solution.
People do, right? Like this, like you see that with like people like researching the global warming and flat Earth.
Yeah, it's that very much conspiratorial, counterintuitive thinking.
He's also very preternaturally good at his job, and that's kind of fits the type. Like a really talented engineer, and he's always been very successful in school, and then he thinks that. Because of success bias, that anything he bends his brain to, it will yield to him, and then he decides he can, his research is just as valid as someone that's had decades of experience in the field. Like I could totally, or if you also maybe he thinks that there's some kind of conspiracy and the experts aren't giving them correct information. So maybe he's amateur, but at least he's doing a good faith effort and investigate. Like that's the conspiracy shit, man. Yeah. It doesn't really make sense.
All right, we move on to Angela suiting up and disposing of Will's wheelchair. She is spotted by some guy in a silver suit who sprints away from her while she's giving chase. He runs through the streets, spraying himself with lube, and then slides directly into a storm drain.
I mean, the internet has made all the jokes about this and the Dr. Manhattan dildo and the fact that so I'm gonna dispense with all that and write your own. Jim, God help me, I did some freeze frame analysis trying to figure out if this guy's lips. Guy's lips were like Petey, like he's got full lips and like Petey does too, but Petey's got like they're like pointier, but then maybe they're not as pointy because the mask is constricting them. Like I don't know. I don't buy that Agent Petey's running around in Tulsa investigating this as the although
it could be, it might not be. There's no way to say for sure. He has a slender frame.
It makes a lot of sense. The guy's obsessed with the Minutemen, and he's fanboying about him, and he wants to wear a mask himself. And what would Agent Petey? What kind of lame superpower would he have? Lube.
This is the lamest of superpowers. Yeah. Like Batman,
but it's undeniably effective.
In this one scenario, yes, very effective.
What if he had?
Although, man, I would have fucking loved a scene where she like wrestles with him, like he sprays himself down with lube, and she tries to grab onto him, and it's slipping and sliding down the street.
Did I mention this in the podcast, the Instant Take podcast or Talk podcast? Because like I swear to God, when he started lighting himself with those chemicals and that silver kind of, I thought he was going to light himself on fire and be like, try to tackle me. Try to, can't arrest what you can't touch. But yeah, and then just what he actually did. You're right. Like, what other applications are there? You could slide under a car. You can slide under a tree. Like, you can slide under things. You can fit through tight openings. But, but not like arbitrarily tight. You can fit through as tight as an opening as a lubed up human can fit through.
Right. And you can go through that opening slightly faster than someone who is not lubed up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, you might gain 10 seconds on them, which might be enough to let you get away, but man,
I mean, maybe he's trained, or he's got like a small frame and he's got his body fat down to 2 or 3%. So like any like he's in the top 1% of thin cross sections, but still.
I don't know. All I know is I love this scene. It's my favorite scene of the entire show so far. Makes no fucking sense, but there it is. Let's move on.
So we talked about whether it could be Petey. The other suggestion that I saw that I thought was interesting is, do you remember The Future is Bright Man? The guy who's holding that sign. It could be him, and this is kind of like a parallel to Rorschach, who you saw, the homeless guy holding the end of his ear, and then it turns out that was a masked crusader.
Didn't that guy have like long dreads?
I didn't think so. I thought he was a little. He was. I thought he was.
Might be misremembering him.
No, I looked at a picture. I wouldn't say he had dreads. No,
okay.
But
I don't know. Say whoever's in the suit can't have that much hair. But
what if the suit just really compresses the hair down?
Yeah, it could be a super tight suit.
Yep. You case those dreads in silver and spray. I don't know, some kind of silicone lube over it, and who knows what can happen.
All right, let's move on to Senator Kean at the precinct, thanking Angela for saving his life, also thereby revealing that he knows her true identity. Angela asks Red and Pirate Jenny about the slippery guy's belt, but they say the new boss won't care. And it turns out that new boss is Laurie, who tells Angela they found Will's fingerprints in her car, and she, of course, connects that to the wheelchair because he's very old, making Angela a suspect in Judd's murder, I think. And Petey enters with another lead.
I love how good Laurie is at pulling in all this and making these inferences, and and how cool Angela is playing this, because like it seems like every 30 seconds Laurie picks up another piece of information and incriminates her, and Angela's just holding her frame, not giving an inch.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely like an inference that someone extremely elderly would have to be in a wheelchair. And therefore would be, at the site of the murder and also in her car. Like, there's no like real solid evidence. It all seems pretty circumstantial.
But man, one more piece
slots in, and she might get arrested.
Yeah.
By the FBI.
Yep, because it puts her at the scene of the crime. Like if they can connect that with Angela, then it's kind of game over.
Yeah.
I mean, we know that she's not responsible for it, but like, good luck talking yourself out of that particular problem. What do we make about Kean? Like, I mean, to me, like I've speculated he's 7th Cavalry. I think he's a little being borderline mustache twirling. The way he's taunting Angela with her true identity, and that was not a friendly confrontation they had on the elevator. Kind of, I was shocked that that he's being this openly kind of evil adjacent at this point in the plot.
Yeah, I didn't do much thinking about Kean this episode.
Okay, well, there's a lot more to think about.
Maybe he's
Loop Man.
Oh fuck! I mean, he's
the sewer connects right to the police department, and he skated down there, took off his silver suit just in time to meet with his bodyguards to taunt Angela about her identity.
Yeah. The fringes of his coat have lube all over him. You should go back and freeze frame.
For sure.
Okay, Laurie, Angela, and Petey drive to this new lead, which we'll find out is Lady True. As they discuss thermodynamic miracles and traumas from their past, Laurie has Petey tell Angela about her traumatic backstory.
I thought it was pretty funny when we were watching the show in real time. We were like making a joke. Cause like, imagine if like Petey's just stuck in the back of his car with his hands folded in his lap, listening to these women have this conversation.
Yeah.
And then they pan back to him so he can exposit about Laurie's background.
How much do we know about Angela's trauma? Like, her parents are dead, yes. We don't really know the circumstances around that. No, we don't.
And there's some not shared tragedy, but there's some shared bond over tragedy because there's this accident that
with Cal, yeah.
And they met in Vietnam, and there's an accident. Like, is it the type of accident that would wipe out both sets of parents, and you kind of grew up together in circumstances, or it's something? I'm curious about, like, is the accident something they shared, or they're just bonding over the fact that they both lost their parents? Who knows? Because they're not. You know, this is kind of cool because as frustrating as it can be sometimes, like, I like it when characters have these conversations where they don't like artificially be like, yeah, the accident. Remember when, you know, blah, because like why no one talks like that.
You prefer passive aggressive exposition,
right? Like, you know, if you and I were talking about our shared history of, like, you know, being Jehovah's Witnesses, we wouldn't like every single time we bring it up. It's not like, you don't remember when we grew up in the same congregation and blah 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 blah, and you got this, you know, it's like yeah.
Probably not.
No.
I was watching this scene thinking, okay, this is clearly here for people who haven't read or seen the old Watchmen stuff.
Sure.
But I admire how it also works for people who have, because they're not just expositing here. They're also giving you glimpses into characters, right? Giving you glimpses into Laurie. How you know, she's unwilling to tell Angela about her own trauma coming from her own mouth, but she's willing to sit there while someone else tells Angela about it, which I think is an interesting glimpse into Laurie.
It's a power play too, which is also an
a bit. Yeah. I mean, all of this serves a larger purpose, not just exposition. So it works for me as someone who does know all this stuff that PD is saying already.
Sure.
And they're pretty good about doing that. Never just doing things because they need information on the screen.
Let me ask you this. Laurie has this theory that people who wear masks are driven by trauma and to right injustices that they themselves have experienced. How does this mask analysis fit in with the Klan or the 7th Cavalry? Are they suggesting that these all Klansmen are traumatized, that they're fighting an injustice that they themselves experience? Like, it does seem like there's maybe are they the exception that proves the rule? When I was watching this the second time, I'm like, well, there's two factions that are wearing masks here. And, like, you know, like I don't actually mind, you know, the concept of empathizing with a racist, you know, like, because I don't think people like are born out of the womb like raring to be racist, and like that's why I want to be. I'm going to be that racist guy. It's like it's almost always this pretty sad set of circumstances, education, negative socioeconomic status, but still. Like that, like it feels like the FBI's analysis of these crusaders falls flat when you start to deal with it in that way. There's like many different reasons why people would wear masks and do the things they do.
I think so.
Maybe that's a blind spot that they're suggesting the characters have.
Could be, but I think in Angela's case, it is sort of true, right? I mean, the look at the genesis of her costume and her mask. It is all about the White Knight. It's all about the killing of all of her friends and like, that's a serious trauma in her life, and it spawned that. So I think Laurie does have her pegged. I do agree, though, that there are circumstances in which that wouldn't be true.
I did like the meta commentary if the Minutemen is a TV show about the Watchmen, and this Watchmen is definitely a TV show about the Watchmen, and the agent dismissing it as garbage. I like that. That's pretty funny.
Okay, so they show up at True Industries. I don't know what to call this place. It's just called True. Where they speak with Lady True and her daughter Beyond. They ask her for a list of people who can fly their flying ships, and Lady True hands it over and then asks Angela in Vietnamese whether she got Will's pills, which she just says, you know, the old fucker can ask me himself. And then they notice the statue of Ozymandias and discuss why he looks so old.
I'm sure you saw the what do they call it, the carbon vite theory, that this is actually some sort of stasis, that Ozzy is literally locked into that statue and experiencing all these things in his head,
and or that he was picked up after he fell to Earth, and this opening scene and then encased in this statue.
That would be the worst. To me, that's the worst. That would be, well, I mean, I don't know.
After escaping, his prison before, now he's re-prisoned. Like,
just now he's in even a worse prison. Like, to me, that would be the most anticlimactic explanation. I don't think much of the theory, which means it's probably right.
Probably, yeah.
Because it does look startlingly like the pose and the imagery and everything that we saw Ozymandias do last episode after his confrontation with the game warden.
Yeah.
So I just don't like it. I guess it seems a little too on the nose.
Yeah, but you're probably correct saying that if we think it's wrong, it's right.
And the other things you're supposed to notice here is like this is a building that is literally designed to survive an apocalypse. Tsunami, earthquake, volcanism, anything direct of a direct nuclear missile strike is going to leave this clock undamaged, which I think is significant.
Yeah.
If you think about in terms of like the original Watchmen and how doomsday apocalyptic it end up getting at the end, and then also the thing you're supposed to notice is this vivarium is very similar to the one that Ozymandias built in the North Pole, or wait, no, Antarctica, the South Pole. And it's also the type of building you might need to build on Mars if you wanted to contain some cantankerous old dude.
Sure.
Safe from the vacuum of space. So because like I said, this is the. It seems like everyone's kind of like on the. It's not a Dr. Manhattan type of prison. It's a Lady True type prison. It does seem a little still beyond her abilities, but then again, she's got $1 trillion, Jim. Like, what if Elon Musk had $1 trillion? He's just a billionaire.
There's a lot you can do with $1 trillion.
There's lots you can do with $1 trillion that you can't do with $1 billion.
True.
Lakes full of babies, one of those things.
The other thing I noticed about this scene is when PD goes to follow them, Beyond dismisses him, says "ladies only," which I feel like is just in there to see how many men they can trigger with that.
Well, not only that, but also it's like
here's
breaking the Bechdel test. Like, not only are we going to have females having conversations that are not about a man or even a man presence, we're going to like spike it in the man's face that we're doing that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's pretty funny.
All right, we move on to some of the weirdest scenes in the episode, aside from maybe Lube Man. Ozymandias.
You think Lube Man's weirder than this?
There's
maybe contextually.
Lube Man's fucking weird. Okay, maybe not as entertaining as Lube Man.
Okay.
But definitely weirder. How about that?
I'll buy that.
Ozzy is fishing fetuses out of a lake, like you do. And he puts them in an incubator where they grow into full adults in a matter of minutes. He takes them to his manor and introduces them to their new life as his personal servants. And they conduct more experiments, flinging bodies into the sky.
Yeah, there's a lot of things I think. There's a lot of things I like. Like, I love the transition because you already knew what was going to happen when he puts these babies in the chamber.
Yeah.
And one of them was a boy, one of them was a girl. But I still like the nifty thing where they stay on Jeremy Irons' face as you hear these babies crying turn into full-grown adults screaming in the chamber. They also show him eating cake, so you don't have to. You can imagine that He's a Jolly Good Fellow preceded the massacre that happened in the manor. And there's also like this kind of interesting thing he says where you guys are flaws in this thoughtless design. I would never burden creatures such as yourself with the gift of life when you have no purpose except to serve. If you take off the exception to serve, that's an accurate description of humans. We are given the gift of life, and yet we have no purpose. What's the commentary there? Or is there any? Or is it like...
I mean, I think that is the commentary.
Yeah?
Yeah. Like, it's definitely saying something about human existence.
Does that show? But is that like a blind spot that Ozymandias himself has? That he's being dismissive of these creatures, yet I don't know. Are they incapable of having?
He might view himself as something beyond a human, right? At this point, like 30 years on from where he was at the end of Watchmen,
he thinks a lot of himself for sure.
He absolutely has an ego. Yeah.
What does he mean?
Here's the thing though about this.
Okay.
I don't think enough people are talking about what an absolute atrocity is being committed here. Like, in as much as this show is about slavery, I look at these servants and I look at the things that Jeremy Irons is saying to them, and I can't help but draw parallels here.
Yeah.
And everyone is like all entertained by, oh, look at Ozzy doing these weird things. Haha, kill servants. Haha. This is fucking dark.
Yeah.
It's real dark. And I don't see anybody talking about the massacres, the abuses, the heinous shit that he's doing to people. Is it because they're white? Because if they were black, this would be a hugely different conversation.
I guess that's true. Yeah, you have this
if they were
race of
servants,
beings that are created for the purpose of servitude, and their lives are
and they're
just
being brought in from this
for the master's amusement. Yeah, no, you're not wrong. You're not wrong.
No, it's fucked up. But nobody's talking about it, and I don't know why.
Probably because like nobody's outraged, because like it's probably part of the commentary, people assuming it. But yeah, you're right. Why isn't people? I haven't even seen any people taking a note of how it ties into the main narrative.
There's your note.
What is the deal with the horseshoe? Because there's like in the
love
first
that
episode,
he puts it on that knife.
Well, yeah, it's like a ringer. But I also he says I don't need this yet. Is there like is this like? Is this like a test, like that horseshoe is a magic ticket to get home, and if he will just accept that he needs it, that he is like, is this his? Because I don't know, because I in the first episode he makes a wry comment about like, you know, no, put that that's not. I just assumed it was like this clone not really understanding cutlery, but like him saying to this dead man, no, I don't need this yet. What does that mean?
That's a good question. I don't know.
The horseshoe is something.
It's definitely something. And I feel like we've gotten sort of distracted by the experiments, and we're thinking less about the play now.
Yeah.
Because the play has to somehow be important. I don't think it's for his own amusement that he's putting on this play.
Is it just like he doesn't need luck? Is it like his rejection of luck? Because, you know, that's like the stereotypical horseshoe. It's lucky. It's a lucky implement.
Could be, but... Yeah, maybe he's... Because there's a lot of talk about, you know, how Adrian Veidt made his money in the first place. Like, he inherited this big amount of wealth, and then he gave it all away and said, I'm going to fucking do it myself because I'm the smartest man in the history of the world. And then he did it. So you could say, essentially, that he has turned down luck before with this massive inheritance. So, yeah, if he's the kind of person who doesn't believe he needs luck, and he's not desperate enough to take the luck...
Yeah.
that he needs to get out of this situation yet.
Yeah, I wonder if he rings that, or somehow uses it. It calls the game warden and the simulation's over or something. I'm predicting that there's going to be some kind of literal use of this horseshoe as a tool.
Yeah, it's the equivalent of his safe word.
Yeah, horseshoe. Yeah, that's a good safe word too.
Pretty good. Yeah.
I can't think of that turning up much in mini sex acts.
No. You're probably right. Okay, let's move on.
And if you don't need to email us on that, if there's something we're missing, I'm 43 years old. I've seen a lot. Brain's all full up with that kind of stuff at this point.
All right, let's take that out of our brains. Put this in 4 candles, 4 years. And he says, since I was sent here, let the theorizing commence. I mean, the theory has already been crafted. Like it's going to be 7 years and he's going to escape.
What I don't understand is like, so obviously, you know, he's trying to test independently a spacesuit with a way to launch, but like, what's the plan? You get launched into space, you're in a spacesuit.
Yep.
You have to deal with the fact that you're several hundred yards above a surface. Is like the next step some kind of parachute?
On the moon?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Or Mars. Either way, they don't work. Like, you need retro rockets and shit because there's just not enough atmosphere there.
Right.
So I'm wondering.
So is the speculation that he's on the moon now based on this transition? Because I don't know how much I'm supposed to...
Nope, because the transitions don't mean anything.
Right, I don't know how much I'm supposed to believe those. So I've seen theorization that he is underwater. I've seen all kinds of theories. Because a suit might actually get you out from underwater. Although if you're deep enough, it's not going to fucking matter. It'll just crush you.
But that's what I'm saying.
Cow skin is not going to help you.
Mr. Phillips wasn't like flooded and crushed. He was frozen and asphyxiated. That to me, that implies outer space. But
yeah, me too. It
could be a satellite thing too. He could be in some kind of orbital platform prison. But then, how would the gravity work? How does the gravity work anyway? Because whether he's on the Earth or whether he's on Mars or the moon. it still doesn't have gravity to like just kind of like walk around.
Or to bring a body back down if it went up.
And Lady True is she's a expert in genetic engineering and pharmacy tech, but she's not like a expert in anti-gravity. So what the fuck?
I don't know. I didn't see anybody talking about the Roman numerals that are on his catapult either.
Oh, yeah.
Like, he switches. He says, like, let's load it back up, and then he switches it to another numeral.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Is he shooting in different directions?
I don't know. I assumed it was declination or elevation, but, like...
Right. So he's testing, like, the particular path?
Optimal trajectory. But,
right.
But what is it telling him? Like, I have no idea. We're supposed to not know.
Right. Okay, we go back to Angela returning home where Cal tells her that Laurie came by. Well, he's prompted, and then he tells her Laurie came by and asked who called on the night that Judd was killed. Cal apparently lied to her, which he hates doing, and he suggests that Laurie might be an ally who could help her find the old man, but Angela says she can do that herself. So this is where he's reading that book that we mentioned with the title of the episode, Things Fall Apart.
Uh-huh.
With a name I don't know how to pronounce. Do you?
Are you talking about the guy's name?
Yeah.
I don't have it in front of me.
Okay.
It's like I'd have to scroll like 15 pages to get to it.
I feel bad because he is a notable figure in African literature, but look, I don't read African literature.
I don't give a shit if his name was Thomas Friedman. If I didn't have that name in front of me, I wouldn't be able to just call it out of my like who's the guy who's writing the book The Stranger on Mr. Robot?
Camus?
Fuck you. See? You are racist. I'm not.
Albert Camus? I only know that because I did a ton of research. Yeah. Okay. Anything else to say about the scene, or?
Well,
it's
we already talked
Cal
about
doesn't lie to people, I think.
Yeah, and there's this tension because she picks a fight with him, but his point is like, I could easily be picking a fight with you because you're step way the fuck outside of my He's so honest that he won't lie to his little girls about the small comfort of like heaven versus the abyss of death.
Yeah,
and he's telling lies to a federal agent,
and he's living a lie. I mean, they're both living lies.
Yeah.
She's a cop. He's living with that information. Not telling anyone. But
I like that she's not doing in True Detective. If this was like a husband and wife team, they would not be talking about shit at all. Like there wouldn't be but he knows literally everything that Angela knows.
Yeah.
It's just he's resentful that he has to carry all this weight inside the family.
We go back to Lady True's daughter waking from a nightmare, going into her mother for comfort. Lady True sends her back to bed without much of that. And Will and Lady True discuss her concerns with his plans to reveal himself to Angela in due time. We find out there are 3 days until Angela will hate Will for what he's done. So much shit. This is a dense scene here.
So there's the things so let's talk about the things we know.
Yeah.
Lady True is pumping her daughter full of some chemical that appears to be triggering some memory that she herself doesn't have from the Vietnam War.
That's what it sounds like. Yeah, it sounds like Lady True's experience was one of the atrocities in Vietnam,
or it could be Lady True's mother, given their relative ages and whatnot.
Yeah,
and that Lady True and Will themselves draw a connection between this medical treatment that Bien's having with these pills that Will says helps him with his memory.
Yeah,
there's this idea that they are trying to both show their offspring actual things that they've gone through to express some sort of truth to them. What does that mean? I don't know. I've got some theories, but...
And is it being done through the chemicals, or is it being done through a sort of drip feed of information over time? And I think there are two ways to read, what Will says about is that why you do the same thing to your daughter? He could be talking about, just giving little bits of information, right? 'Cause she hears this about this nightmare, but she doesn't say, oh yeah, that was my experience.
Right.
The things that you're reliving here or not dreaming about are things that I actually experienced or whatever. And Will is sort of, being cagey with Angela. Is it the chemicals or is it just information?
I think, I think they're kind of the same because they say that these pills are essentially are passive aggressive exposition.
Right, but leaving the pills as a breadcrumb to follow to get other information could be a thing. Like,
oh, I see.
Is it actually the chemicals that induce memories, or is it the?
They wanted you. Well, I'd say this: the show seems to want you to think that, whether that's for misdirection purposes or it's because that's actually what's happening. It seems like the show because you cut to the IV and then you focus in on Bien and she wakes up and she has this nightmare. A nightmare that if you go with this a Vietnam War experience that she can't possibly have had.
Right.
Do you?
Yeah, I tend to agree with that.
The other thing that was revealed is the Will is now wheelchair bound. I mean, we kind of have, had hints that he himself said that I can lift 200 pounds, and we're skeptical because he has a wheelchair. But turns out he's a large, powerful man. Louis Gossett Jr. is 6'4". And I thought, when he stood up, they actually built up his. They actually might have padded out his chest and give him that kind of barrel superhero kind of look. Because in other scenes you can kind of see that he's a pretty old dude. And then so just in 3 days something's going to happen that's cause Angela to hate him. That she'll know what he did and that she'll hate me for it. And he's in all the way on this plan, and as they look at the clock, he says tick-tock, which is a direct parallel to what the 7th Cavalry says.
And I think this clock is supposed to be done at the same time that Angela will hate him in 3 days.
Seems like it, yeah, because it's currently being constructed. If it's, I guess that's just an assumption we're making that the 3 days is tied to the completion of the clock, but it seems like a reasonable assumption.
I think so. The other place you can tie this in is with Veidt, because there were 4 candles on his cake, and we are presuming he's been gone for 7 years, and these candles somehow are anniversary candles that tie to those 7 years. There are 3 of those left.
So
years
a day of
and days.
years,
That's
kind
a
of
very
Bible
biblical
chronology
thing.
shit you're pulling on me, Jim.
I'm sorry. Yes. But I don't think it's coincidence that 3 days from now, 3 candles from now, something will happen. And the 7K is also talking about a big event. Were they talking about Judd's death, or are they talking about something else that could be coinciding with the countdown here?
You know what? When you said it like that, also 7K, that number 7 there, that's number again. It's the period of Adrian's exile.
That's true. I didn't think about it.
What was your actual? Because that's where.
Is it possible that there's something big coming soon?
I think they're related. Yeah, for sure.
Could be tied to this.
Yeah, I've got a theory, a kind of unification theory that I was talking about this with my friend Anthony Ladon. He and I worked on a book together on Game of Thrones. He said, "Have you heard about the theory of transgenerational trauma?" And so he gave me some things to research on this, and I guess this is a theory that came up in the 60s when you had the survivors of the German concentration camps that clinicians observed in the 60s that a lot of their children of these survivors were seeking treatment in these crisis clinics throughout Canada, that the grandchildren of Holocaust survivors were 300% more likely to be referred to a child psychiatry clinic in comparison to the general population. And this led to, with this plus with theories of epigenetics, which is the study of heritable changes that do not involve alteration of a DNA sequence. So like an example of that is we all know that we all come from an egg that gets fertilized. That is a human cell, and it starts dividing. And at some point they start dividing and they're all the same cells, but at some point they start differentiating into nervous systems and bones and arms and legs and feet and toes and all that kind of stuff, right? Mm-hmm. But it's the same DNA. So like what causes the cells to start becoming like feet and fingers and toes? There's all this other, it's like your DNA is just like a one part of it. It's presence of certain hormones, certain developmental chemicals in the womb that cause this stuff to kind of sort out. It's also the same reason why, children with parents that have black hair can occasionally be blonde or redhead, because like that, even though the DNA is there and those genes get expressed or repressed, and that what has a big impact on how we actually look. So there's this idea that like if there's a presence of like stress hormones in a parent when they're conceiving a child or carrying a child, that could have some kind of genetic switch it flips on to, and it would make the child more susceptible to stress and depression later in life. And maybe, I don't know, maybe that's a survival mechanism for like, think about, 200,000 years ago, primitive humans, they're going through a drought or a famine, and it causes something to change to make them fundamentally more conservative or more cautious or, whatever. And that's a survival trait that we inherit. But I also read that there's like studies they've done on mice where they can prove that certain fears can be passed on. They had this experiment where they took these laboratory mice and they exposed them to a strong smell, and then they accompanied that smell with an electric shock, and the mice learned to fear the scent alone, so they would start having a stress response if they just smell the smell. But they discovered this fear could be passed down to the mice's offspring. So the offspring would never experience an electric shock, but the children of these mice would show the same stress response that their parents did. And this would last for 2 to 3 generations, where you could expose these mice and their children to this chemical smell, and they'd all freak the fuck out before that response was lost. So they kind of like, if a laboratory experimented that, like, some of these stress changes can be inheritable through this epigenetic genetic memory. And they talked about how, the concept of transgenerational trauma has been recorded in refugees and their children, and that can persist through several generations. Traumas from violence, political persecution, family instability, hardships of migration, slavery, racial discrimination. It seems like there might be something that they're playing around with this, especially in centered around African Americans or Black Americans. Which leads me to the next thought: is the Millennium Clock some form of that Lady True is using these chemicals and her expertise in genetic engineering, that this is going to be something that causes like a mass change in the same way that like Ozymandias, he had the psychic squid that caused a mass change in the world. Is she building this thing and deliberately engineering like a near race war to kind of prove that something can be done about it? Like if you got this like 7th Cavalry and some device or some chemical that's released by this Millennium Clock forces them to, like, in a genetic way, go through the trauma of like racial injustice or something and cures them of the racism.
Yeah, that could be where the show is headed.
Yeah,
it seems like there are a lot of pieces that fit into that puzzle.
Yeah, I think that's my current working theory, that this is like some kind of like statement on this epigenetic and transgenerational trauma and Lady True's attempts to solve it. And also there's other add-ons that I saw the people building on this theory, like the reason Ozymandias is trapped in some kind of like limbo state is because Lady True doesn't have the answer herself, but she's forcing him to think about it, and like that might be like why he's experimenting with writing this play. If he's got these life forms that don't seem like they can learn or make these connections. He's always frustrated, like, why they can't comprehend certain things. Like if he can get them to have an empathetic response, like he's slaughtering them and doing like all this, and it's like, how can I get these humans to kind of care for each other? I don't know. There's something there. I think that's interesting.
Yeah, I think inducing empathy would be an interesting way for this show to go. I'm trying to reconcile this with her labeling of Will's pills as passive-aggressive exposition. Is it because he didn't force-feed these pills to her? Is that the passive-aggressive part? Is she willing to, take it one step further and force everyone to have this shared experience to enable the empathy button?
So the passive-aggressive there is like her, with her child, she's just being aggressive.
Right, she's just pumping those chemicals right into
here's a needle, here's the bag, rapid infusion, honey, where Will's kind of like making it seem like she has a choice, but there's also a deadline. I think so. Okay, you're onto something there too.
Yeah. All right. That's the end of the episode. We do have some Peteypedia stuff to talk
about the Peteypedia. Where do you want to begin? It's one interesting entry and then one very short entry that is nevertheless very long and girthy.
God. Some would say it's about 13 inches by 4 inches. So let's talk about it. There's a schematic of the Manhattan Dick dildo that is
Vibrator,
called
Jim.
Excalibur.
It's a dildo.
It is technically a vibrator. Yeah. And we got verification that the balls are in fact the batteries.
Yep, detachable
right
separately, left, right, and center, as they say.
Left, right, and shaft. Yeah, so that's pretty funny. You should go take a look at that because it just has a lot of things that are labeled.
Yeah, the funniest one was like there's this handwritten note about the rubber sheathing failed during self-testing.
Who self-tested this?
I mean,
so okay, let's talk.
Night Owl is what my
Right. Okay, so let's talk about the other document,
okay. So
which is an interview with Laurie and an FBI agent, an interrogation of Laurie.
And this in the stream of time, this happens on 4/25/95, which is 6 days after the time in our timeline where Timothy McVeigh bombed the Murrah building in Oklahoma.
But apparently in the Watchmen universe, Laurie stopped that attack.
Yes, perhaps her and Dan both teamed because this is described as like one last job that they did together.
I think you're right about that. And also in that document, the transcription of the interview, it's revealed that Dan's company was both selling the Archie stuff to the military and the local police, and also developed Excalibur.
Yeah. And this is Merlin Corp, which and Excalibur is the name of the Manhattan thing. This also is very heavily redacted. There's a lot of things that are super interesting, but it's redacted. And there's a couple other things they reveal that first of all, I thought was interesting is this interrogation is being conducted by an agent, David Latimer. And I just a shot in the dark, I just searched for David Latimer, and I came a bunch of articles that there's this 80-year-old dude who back on Easter Sunday for extra fucking Lindelof flavor planted a garden in a giant glass ball and has kept this vivarium going for since 1960, so 60 years, and he's only opened it once to add a little bit of water, and it's been going this whole time.
Okay.
So there's that.
And the connection being that we were treated to a vivarium that Lady True was
like
living
these closed
in.
ecosystems. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It could just be an Easter egg, but I thought it's an Easter Sunday egg that's only been open once. But also reveals that she is not going by Laurie Blake yet, but she is calling herself the comedian.
Yeah.
That they, before this Oklahoma City bombing thwarting, that they apparently joined forces together, that her and Night Owl had a falling out over him wanting to settle down and have children and her wanting to buy guns. So going a little bit less nonviolent in their crime fighting. And that she implies that they hadn't been lovers for some time. And then there is this thing where the agents asked her about Rorschach's whereabouts. And she gives a long answer that goes back and forth between the agents, and it's all redacted except for the phrase Mars. If you'll remember, everyone in the world thought, it says Mars. If you'll remember, everyone thought the world was about to fucking end. And then there's more back and forth, and then there's the comment, sad little redhead with lifts in his shoes, which is probably referring to Rorschach. Then they find that she has this steel attaché case. And she says you got to be careful of that because the contents have been known to cause cancer. This is all joke about
Manhattan Tech. Yeah.
She also says that this is something Dan created for her when they broke up as kind of like a personal fuck you, because maybe they had some angry fights about Manhattan and her being stuck on him. And then she threatens the agents with knowledge. She says you should tell your boss to tell his boss to tell his boss to tell Gatsby that I know what really happened on 11/2, which is the date of the first psychic squid attack. Well, the fake psychic squid attack. Thoughts?
I mean, I hope the 7K doesn't get a hold of this dildo because it is lithium powered.
It's the world's largest single source of Dr. Manhattan energy technology.
Imagine what they could do with that.
Yeah, like what the fuck? Yeah, we've forgotten about that.
The lithium bag? I haven't forgotten.
Was that in the vest? So we've already seen it blow up?
No, I don't think we've seen anything from that yet.
Well, I mean, it would be interesting if they made a dirty bomb and all the cops there are going to come down with cancer or something. Everyone was suspecting dirty bomb. We saw 7th Cavalry make a bomb and explode himself, and nobody connected that to the watch batteries that I saw.
It's just really fucking hard to do cancer as a bomb on television. Like, what do you show? Do you flash forward 30 years? And
they did it with they did it with the original Watchmen, where it's like, you know, they just did it. You know, these people are getting cancer. It's John. Oh no, it's not John. Here's the inset of like these gases going through certain.
This would be like very rapid onset.
Yeah.
Cancer, just like.
Can you get rapid onset cancer?
I mean, I think there are cancers that can eat you in a matter of a year or so, but
but
you still have to flash forward quite a bit, and really, like, that's got to be your big reveal, and then you
because it seems like with radiation, like if you survive the initial blast, like your problem is that you've got just a greatly elevated chance of cancer, but it's not like it's going to kill you like in a month or two. It's going to be a year, multiple years. Like those guys when we were watching Chernobyl, like that was like 5 years on when they were really starting to drop like flies.
Yeah,
the ones that at least survived their initial blast. So
yeah, I don't. It's not quite as dramatic and immediate effect as like, you know, psychic squid explosions or Dr. Manhattan energy vaporizing people. Like
her saying to tell Gatsby, that's a reference to Robert Redford, right? Because he played the Great Gatsby.
Oh, did he?
In an adaptation.
I didn't know that.
So she's saying, like, you know, run it up the chain, tell the president that I know.
Nice. Okay.
So, yeah. She's got friends in high places, too, it seems.
She does. Anything else, or should we go to feedback?
We've got feedback. If you'd like to send it to us, it's easy to do so. Send an email to watchmen@baldmove.com, or you can get on our forums, forums.baldmove.com. If you'd like to discuss your latest crazy clone theory, your latest lube man theory with your fellow fans. Let's get on to Lauren. Has a few thoughts and questions for us. The interrogation file in PDpedia, which we were just talking about, was interesting. Laurie preventing Timothy McVeigh from blowing up the Murrah building by killing him, which seems consistent with her MO. It does tie her back to Oklahoma well before the beginning of the series, which I can't seem to figure out why that matters. I also wonder when she becomes known as Laurie Blake, since in this transcript she has her original name, but is also known as a comedian. That's a good question at the end. Do you have any thoughts about the Oklahoma tie-in?
No.
Because my thought is, like, what if... So that's 10 years after Adrian's scheme.
Mm-hmm.
What if, like, that they're positing that that's I don't know. I'm trying to draw a connection between bombs and cancer bombs and 7th Cavalry bombs and psychic squids and something that they and Lady True engineering some kind of severe racial animosity so she can test this empathy bomb, like that this like this has been in the works for 30 years and this is a grand realization of this scheme, but it's like on the tip of my tongue, but I can't quite put it together. It isn't just coincidence that Laurie's out there fucking around in Oklahoma, though, right?
It doesn't seem like it.
Then, of course, we had the diagram of Dr. Manhattan and his dildo. That's not just a dildo. I don't really understand the diagram, but it seems like it's more than what it looks like. I don't know, because there's like references to like subatomic particles, but it also just seems like it's a vibrator with maybe some Dr. Manhattan tingles, some ionizing, you know, to get you that authentic licking a battery flavor and sensation.
Yeah.
What do we think of Cal's accident was? I'm really curious to learn more about his and Angela's backstory and how they met in Vietnam. Did we know Angela was an orphan until this episode? I think
I thought so, but
because we were wondering like why she adopted this family, and then in the second episode they revealed that like these were her partner's kids, or like these were children of slain officers, so that made sense. But now that now it makes like double triple sense, because we know that she was an orphan, perhaps Cal was too. So like you have all these kids that need homes.
This family's got a fucked up history.
Yeah,
of parents dying.
Yeah, you're right.
Like every generation's parents die.
Yeah.
I mean, that's true of every generation that's ever existed.
But yeah, no, traumatically.
But traumatically.
It goes back to the epigenetic trauma theory that, like, you know, this keeps happening. Right. Does it keep happening because it keeps happening? A small detail from the entire Insane Vite storyline. What do we think he's going to do with that horseshoe? He keeps saying he doesn't need it yet, which means it just isn't the new Mr. Phillips being confused. It actually has some sort of purpose. That's what I'm going for, Lauren.
It's lithium powered. It vibrates. And it's designed for 2 holes, not just one.
It's designed to penetrate the anus while tickling the taint.
Yes. Yeah.
Gently vibrating the balls.
There's your purpose.
Mm-hmm. Ironclad. Stanislav. It's pretty clear that Lady True is the one holding Vite captive based on the cloning parallels and the fact that she's capable of terraforming an enclosed space to replicate a desired atmosphere. In her case, she lives in a faux Vietnam in the middle of Oklahoma. It's not much of a stretch that she could create a faux Wales for Vite on another planet. True.
Right. You know, like people who build biodomes here.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, not much of a stretch.
I've seen that Pauly Shore movie.
Saturn, why not? Let's put one there.
Yeah. Clouds of Venus. We're coming Cloud City. Best.
But no, when you're a trillionaire and it's in the sci-fi world that we're talking about,
sure.
I think it's fair to say it's not that huge of a stretch.
It is. They will have some bit of explaining to do because, like, how do you do that outside of the government finding out?
Mm-hmm.
You know, we have live satellite imagery of Mars, and there is that thing like Dr. Manhattan is connected in some way. Because he does not building castles that look like Vite's castle on Mars for nothing.
Mm-hmm.
What's more interesting is how or why True or Vite came to this arrangement. Vite implies that he was tricked into thinking he wasn't really going to be imprisoned. That's no small feat considering his status as the smartest man on the planet. I suspect Lady True appealed to his ego since Vite probably sees himself as a demigod among mortals. She probably convinced him to go off into isolation to do god shit? Emulating Dr. Manhattan? That's where I don't. Yeah, it's unclear to me. It would be turnabout for Adrian, who used so many people to just murder them to cover up his tracks, to be used himself in that way. And I don't know. Lady True seems like she's pretty smart too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're cloning impossibly. You're conceiving children from eggs that are non-viable. You're cloning babies at the bottom of a lake somehow.
But doesn't he say, since I was sent here? Does sent imply that he went against his will?
No, because you can be sent on a mission that turns out to be a suicide mission, but that doesn't mean that you were sent against your will, you know?
Yeah. It's true.
So, but it is an interesting, neutral kind of word choice, for sure. Barry, I think the clanhood is going to be Chekhov's clanhood. Boy, what's Walter Koenig going to say about that? Angela giving it the looking glasses, in my opinion, is going to set him up accidentally being framed as a 7th Cavalry member, especially as it looks a bit like Rorschach, or he looks a bit like Rorschach, has been shown to be a prepper. To an outsider, he fits the profile. That would be a tragedy, because he seems like above the board, above the hood board kind of guy. But that would be.
What's his view on people paying taxes? That's what I want to know.
Gotta see. It's as long as it goes to squid research, he's fine.
Right.
Interesting theory. I'll be keeping my eye on that one, Barry. Stephanie, a few random thoughts about the latest insanity-filled episode. Maybe True's daughter is a clone of her, and that's why she retains the memories of Vietnam.
Could be.
She also parenthetically keeps wondering about the woman the comedian killed in Vietnam. As Dr. Manhattan looked on, that was pregnant with his child.
Actually, if we're going with this epigenetic memory transfer, wouldn't we have to say that a clone is not likely to experience that because it's not actually a product of...
Which would explain the chemicals they're pumping it full of.
Right. So there's somehow... Yeah, so the clone would be pumped full of these memory-inducing chemicals that a natural-born child would have automatically gotten through the birth process. Like, okay.
Yeah. I don't know. It's wild. And you start thinking about some things that I was reading after the first episode where people were speculating that maybe Manhattan saved this baby somehow, and this baby became Lady True.
Right, the one that comedian.
Yeah.
Maybe killed, maybe didn't kill.
Yeah, like Manhattan would have to like intervene there, and he certainly is in his powers to do so.
Yeah.
But I don't know. That'll be wild. My take on the pills that Will left behind is that it's like when an unsure lover leaves behind a jacket or watch. Perhaps he intentionally left them because he wanted to have a reason to engage with Angela again. That's why True is calling him out as being unnecessarily manipulative.
Yeah.
And also, I guess that makes sense to the passive aggressive. Like, she's trying to like prompt Angela to ask about that, and she's like, "No, have him ask me himself."
Yeah.
Be aggressive about it. Also, in her opinion, Adrian's totally on the moon because #transitions matter. I feel bad, Stephanie, because I spent a lot of this episode arguing that the transitions are all bullshit in the show.
I think transitions matter. The first scene was a flashback. Adrian Veidt's on the moon. Yeah.
So neither Lady True nor her daughter ages perceptibly?
Or that she's a second clone that was made 7 years later. They're time traveling in that scene. Who the fuck knows?
She's Dr. Manhattan. She can assemble herself into
She could be Dr. Manhattan.
He can look like anybody, even though everyone says that's impossible. As we've pointed out, that seems ludicrous. If you can change your size, you can change your color. Well, you just can't change the shape of your face. What the fuck? John brought up the thermodynamic miracle in the books when Laurie was trying to convince him to save or even care about the Earth. This idea reminded me that people as individuals reminded him rather that people as individuals are miracles. Also, that Billie Holiday was singing that "You Are My Thrill" during a sweet scene with Night Owl and Laurie in the book. Nice callback to the show to have Laurie playing it in the car. Yeah, I did not catch that, so thanks for pointing that out to us, Stephanie. Tommy, I thought showing Looking Glass's bunker was an interesting choice in an episode that talks about the survivability of the clock that's much more than a clock. Are they implying there's some extinction level event that's going to occur, that the clock was built to survive? Is that what's happening in 3 days? I think it's a pretty good guess.
Yeah.
It's going to be an even bigger, more psychic squid. It's going to fall. It's going to cover all of North America. And that...
I mean, it's got to have something to do with the...
That tower is going to be the bamboo skewer that a giant Manhattan is going to eat the squid like so much sushi. I don't know. I lost the plot.
Okay.
I lost the plot.
He's only got 30 seconds. He better be quick.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, that's all just do you eat squid live? Is that a thing? I assume that squid sushi
But they completely dissolve. They're gone after 30 seconds.
That's why it's taking her so long to perfect the perfect consistency of squid flesh that's going to survive more than 30 seconds.
Yeah, he's going to have to drink the squid if he waits too long. That's no good.
He's Dr. Manhattan. He can do anything. Kurt, overall not super crazy about the show so far, as it seems to prioritize the mystery boxes over its characters. Has a very strong Lost smell to it, in that it very much likes to leave the audience completely in the dark for way too long, such that when things resolve or not, and you start to piece together all the characters' motivations and decisions that went with it, many of them don't make sense, and the whole thing may very much fall apart, which is very Losty. I mean, you're not wrong, except for this is only episode 4, and it's already revealed a lot of the weird stuff, like things that people were like...
You say that, but this episode was the weirdest yet.
It keeps introducing more weird shit. Absolutely.
What's going to happen next episode? So, like,
absolutely,
it just keeps getting weirder and weirder. I thought we were in Act 2.
But we are getting answers along the way, right? Like a lot of things that people are like, I know the whole thing in episode 1 or 2. It's just like episode 3 is revealed.
That's the recipe for Lost. Like, it gives you one answer and asks you 4 more questions.
I felt like yes, but those answers you had to wait several seasons to get, and it's like it's
the saving grace of this is it's a 1 season arc.
It's 9 episodes.
Yeah.
So like only 3 more episodes than Lost had seasons. So
right.
Like my patience is a lot longer on a commitment like this, I think, anyway.
Yeah.
Pierre, I was thinking about Judd and his relationship with Angela. They had such chemistry. It's a real blow to imagine him as a clan leader bent on her eradication. It could certainly be the case, but it'd be more interesting if we were led to judge Judd without all the facts exposing the audience's biases into processes, such as he was a white man in Oklahoma after all. While I was thinking about that, I realized just how many legacies from the first Watchmen are being filled by female characters this time around. Laurie Blake takes on the legacy of the comedian. Lady True seems to be taking on the legacy or role of Ozymandias. Sister Night will have to wrestle with the legacy of Hooded Justice. She also keeps using those night owl glasses. This has me thinking that Jane Crawford may be the one to have taken up the 7th Cavalry / KKK leader role. She's got a connection to Senator Kean, whom we suspect. The old uniform and painting could belong to Jane just as well as Judd. Maybe we'll see Judd's father or grandfather handed the mantle down to Jane due to her political power or connections. I said that theory last episode, so like I'm clearly sympathetic. Now, the only thing I thought, but this could be my own sexist bias, that like the letter was addressed to a male heir.
It is, but we don't know if it came from a grandfather or a father. Right.
So if it's grandfather, then maybe the father decided to pass it on to Jane.
Yeah.
But Judd is the son, right? Jane's not the daughter in this situation. And also, why?
Yeah.
And if he's not down with the 7th Cavalry, then why is he so cavalier about going out unprotected? You know, when
the
cops
protection
are,
of Jane,
when they're being gunned. Yeah. Well,
he would have to be in on it.
Then he's 7th Cavalry. He knows he's in on it in some way.
Right. No, it's. Yeah.
I mean, I could just buy that he is some kind of like deep cover agent, that he's like listening to conservative radio because he wants to know how they think, and you know, he wasn't concerned. But yeah, it's the
more I think it, the more it has to be Judd or no one. Like Judd's either the 7K guy and has the connections, or and maybe his wife is in on it, but I'm thinking he's like, that's his robes. You know, he's the one who knew about the closet. Yeah. And Jane, maybe she knows about the closet as well. But.
I will say that, like, it's standard mystery box tactic to submarine a character who's important. Like, Jane was very important to the first 3 episodes, and she's completely absent in this episode. So, like, one way to misdirect and let us forget is to just keep her submarine for the next couple episodes, and then if she surfaces in episode 7, then buckle up. Jane being a cavalry member is confirmed. Tiong Paul. I wanted to highlight some of the underlying themes I was able to pick up in an otherwise incredibly weird but wildly entertaining episode. I think thematically this episode Lindelof ruminates on legacy, lineage, and existence itself, and given that, I'd argue his underlying thesis statement is the importance of knowing where you came from to get to where and who you need to be. This is spelled out in 2 instances. First, when Lady True says she'll kill the baby if the Clarks don't sign over her land, but then saying she was joking, she'd just find the baby another home. In this exchange, Lady T inadvertently parallels killing the Clark baby with it growing up around strangers and never knowing where it came from or who it truly was. A Clark. Lindelof marks this lack of knowing where one comes from as a fate just as tragic as death. Secondly, we can see this thematically with Angela discovering her family tree, as well as Lady True. In theory, feeding her daughter memories of where she, Lady T, or even Lady T's mother came from. Vietnam, with nightmares of soldiers waking you up in the middle of the night and forcing you to walk miles in the jungle while barefoot. They are saying that this sounds a lot like Vietnam War era Viet Cong tactics, which is interesting because I think you and I are conditioned to think that, oh, that's probably Americans being assholes.
Yeah.
But like we said on the Instant podcast, there was assholes on both sides for sure. It would also explain why Will thinks that he and Lady T, the patriarch and matriarch of their respective lineages, are doing the same thing. He's passively aggressively leading Angela to discover who she is, while Lady T is actively forcing her daughter to literally passively learn about her own lineage via IV while she sleeps. So we talked a little bit. I think, this is all really interesting, especially since, one of the things that is often remarked about the Black experiences in America is, unlike, a lot of us who can trace our ancestors back to the old country and know exactly which village we came from, a lot of our Black American neighbors don't have that luxury. That it's just like, the North Atlantic slave trade is just kind of like a permanent black box that you can't get past. It's like the Big Bang. Like you can't see what happened before that, which to the extent that legacy and knowing where you came from is important, that would be a real blow to you. So I kind of like how they are playing with these concepts, or not playing with them, illuminating these concepts. John, Chinua Achebe's book Things Fall Apart is one of the most well-read books in African literature. The book was published in 1958. It was written as a response to the racism Achebe found in Joseph Conrad's book Heart of Darkness. Even though Conrad wrote the book as a criticism of imperialism, that it was sold as a mission of civilization, but as Conrad points out in the book, it's actually a system of horrific violence, occupation, and resource extraction. Despite this good intention, it still is, in Achebe's view, depicted the people of Africa from a white point of view with no understanding of the cultures they were supplanting, even by those who recognized the violence and criticized it. Things Fall Apart is set in a semi-fictionalized Nigeria near the turn of the century, just before and then during the first Christian missionary invasion, then the following English military invasion of the region. It depicts a fully realized culture, not mindless savages eager for a white savior. These are not animals to be tamed, but full human beings. The main character is banished, then he returns. When he does, his society has changed due to the influence of the Christian missionaries and the British authorities after them. Those who held lower status positions in the culture that had been theirs have adopted Christianity and are rising in recognition as the British imperialists gain power and want to work with those who have converted. Ashabi does not soften his portrayal of Igbo culture to make them into two-dimensional good guys attacked by mustache-twirling villains. The main character, Okonkwo, beats his wives and children, for example. He's obsessed with showing his strong masculinity. The imperialists who came to dominate his country also brought medicine and modern conveniences. Those things are also destroyed parts of the culture built around ritual, health, food preparation, etc. It's complex like life always is. It's not a simple narrative. Importantly, Achebe wrote the book in English, the language of the imperialists, in order to speak to them. Given all this, what does it mean for our show? I don't know. I hope that by giving you this background, you guys might have some ideas. The first thing I thought of was the German leaflet advising black soldiers not to fight for a U.S. that had racial apartheid systems. There's a direct relationship with African slavery where the same sort of cultural annihilation occurred amongst many different cultures brought to the U.S. and ripped apart, never allowed to have any traditions or culture not imposed from the top by the white slave owners, which is also, broadly speaking, Christian culture. Does this go beyond the black-white themes of the season, though? Another imperial force one could imagine is Dr. Manhattans, the Adrian Veidts, the Lady Trues of the world, and whatever plans they have for Tulsa, or even all of humanity with their money, power, and genetic science. A lot of big questions there. I do think there is a strong parallel with that German leaflet that, like, it seems like these... The British colonials used the underclasses of this African Nigerian society as converts and inroads to then split apart that society in much the same way the Germans were trying. Mm-hmm. Like, hey, we know that you are not appreciated. You're not maybe living up to your full potential. You're maybe being held back by the society. So why don't you help us fight against them, and then things will be hunky-dory for you.
Yeah.
That's... Like I said, that's the only thing that I had over your own analysis, which I thought was pretty excellent, John. Mm-hmm. Eli, so watching reactions to episode 4 of The Watchmen crystallized just how important children and parent-child relationships are in the Watchmen series. We've seen eggs as a major motif, but if you consider newborns, then we can add in the squidfall, Vates. Jesus Christ. Let me try this again. Eli. So watching reactions to episode 4 of The Watchmen crystallized just how important children and parent-child relationships are in the Watchmen series. We've seen eggs as a major motif, but if you consider newborns, then we can add in the squidfall, Veidt's servants, and Angela's foster family as part of the same thematic discussions. This ties into the greater theme of legacies, both personal ones, that of American, and that of the original Watchmen comic. If we assume all the child-related weirdness is from the same source, then Lady True is likely responsible for the fetus pond, and thus Ozymandias' prison, and the periodic squidfall. Further, though, if we assume her daughter is a clone who is being given memories of her mother through an IV drip, already assuming a lot here, and these memories are of Vietnam death marches, it would make sense that the adult Lady True we see is also a clone with her own mother's memories from the Vietnam War. You know, one thing we didn't talk about with this... whole squidfall and how in 1995 Laurie presumably dropped a dime on the whole scheme to President Redford, because we were kind of debating whether these periodic squidfalls were like some kind of natural phenomenon caused by Ozymandias fucking with science, or whether this was like the government trying to do something. Does it feel to you like this is putting the thumb on the side of the scale that the government's doing a cover-up? Because the government knows it's bullshit.
Or, yeah, at the very least, it's extremely likely they do. I doubt she says that and then doesn't divulge any information.
Yeah. She decides not to play ball.
Yeah. No, that does add a wrinkle, and I don't know how that affects it.
But also puts Will's comments, continuing Jessica's comment, that the pills were there to help with his memory and perspective. The reason he appears so young for his age is that, he is a clone, or possibly more darkly, he's actually Angela's biological father, and keeps a sense of self by taking pills that contain the original Will Reeves memories. Thus, of Angela and possibly anyone else, but they may need to be genetically related. Insert technobabble about genetic memory. Takes the pills. They will get his backstory firsthand. Holy shit. Well, no, wait a second. Angela would recognize her biological father, wouldn't she? Unless...
How old was she when her parents were killed?
I don't know. Like, old enough to meet with, like, unless they're, like, saying that her and Cal met when they were children and they were, like, childhood sweethearts. I don't know. We don't know enough, but, like...
Yeah, we don't quite have enough information.
Or is she saying that, like, what she thinks of her parents are not her real parents? Mm-hmm. So this is, like, biological father. And I guess they played that in a Watchmen because Laurie was raised by a man who she thought was her father, but it turns out it was a comedian. So there's definitely that shell game being played here. If this is actually true, then it draws thematic links between Beyond, Will, Phillips, and Crookshanks and the Squidfall. They're all people created, with the possible exception of Beyond, without any kind of loving intent, but rather to serve a purpose. Beyond and Will literally exist to become their parents. They are a direct and forceful continuation of a legacy to the exclusion of their former self. We currently have Beyond as an independent person, but Will appears to have been completely subsumed by his past self. The Squid and the prison servants are more directly and obviously victimized by callous creators and parental figures to serve an agenda. As of yet, it's unclear if the same view is being taken of Angela herself. It may or not be a coincidence, but when The Simpsons wanted to parody how Alan Moore's works were handled by others and how much he hated that, they went with the Watchmen babies. I think that this theory is unnecessarily complicated by the trying to make Will be like the father instead of the grandfather. It's much cleaner if he's just a grandfather, and then everything else you say is absolutely right on. Yeah. Beyond and Phillips and Crookshanks being like these engineered things and not because of any kind of love. Because I don't know. Like I guess it kind of tracks that Will would take pills that make him be his dad, but
it could, yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. The show's like, there's what's a theory too weird that you can't... I mean, that's my hell.
There isn't one.
Is that, what is a theory that is too full of shit that I cannot read on this podcast? And also, what theory sounds so good that it's probably based on screeners that are floating around out right. there and people speculating based on advanced knowledge? Because I had, our buddy Joanna Robinson was just essentially calling people out on Twitter for doing that.
Yeah.
She's like, I'm looking at you, and I've seen all the scale, and I'm looking at people speculating, and I'm side-eyeing y'all. So it's like, I don't know. This is like season 6 of Game of Thrones all over again. What's real? What's not? Plus, you got squid babies and fetus farms and all that stuff.
This show is infinitely weirder than Game of Thrones, yeah.
Oh, for sure. For sure. And that show had ice zombies and dragons.
Uh-huh.
And dragon ice zombies, turns
nothing.
out. That is the podcast that we have for this week. We will see if things make more sense after Sunday night. We will be there with you every step of the way for Instant Take and Instant Talk podcast for club members. As soon as the 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time airing is over with, so at 10 o'clock. That's a long-winded way to say at 10 o'clock. And then, of course, on Tuesday, we'll be back with our full coverage. Please send in any feedback you have to watchmen@baldmove.com, or, again, get on our forums.baldmove.com. That's it for this week. We'll see you on Sunday night. Until then, I'm A.Ron.
I'm Jim.
See ya.